I do want to go down the wormhole of understanding, how you went from your background in military to law. And I know the story just from knowing you over the years. I remember we used to work out at Hybrid together. My wife was pregnant. I was like, I'm going to go to the gym at 5 a.m. You were one of the only 6 other people there that early. It blew my mind. You would get in there every day, you'd grind, you'd work. You always had that it factor that I knew, you were programmed differently than other people. Then I found out you were in the military. Then I found out you opened a law firm. And then mutual connections and business partners over the years. We kept crossing paths. My mother-in-law, I think she's your biggest fan in the world. You built quite an outfit, and you're about to move into an incredible new location, which I'm not going to ruin that surprise for anybody, because it's probably one of the coolest locations I've ever seen. Give me that story. What led you from jumping out of helicopters to defending the little guy?
Well, I lost my ability to see in one of my eyes.
Really?
My right eye. I'm blind in my right eye.
I had no clue.
Yeah. So, that's why the veteran thing sometimes gets me going.
Yeah.
Just because, I find the people who see a lot of death are far less eager to just treat war like it's a tool for patriotism.
Yeah.
Right? And so most of the senior guys I knew in the military who have seen a lot of death, they're actually anti-war. Because they realize, it just doesn't really work. And all that happens is young people go and get killed for people who sit back here who aren't in danger. Yeah. Right? And so I don't like to talk about it too much, but the end result is the Army treated me very well. So then they sent me to law school. And I think the Canadian military treats veterans amazing. And don't let anybody tell you differently. Then I went to law school, and I was paid to go to law school.
Cool.
And then I wanted to continue kind of on that white hat job. So I felt I was a Canadian peacekeeper, went in some war zones. I felt like I was out there. Back then, it felt like I was part of a Canadian. The military training is unbelievably tough to get in some of the units we're in. But then you become, and this has kind of captured my view of being tough is not being a bully. Not name calling. Being tough is just quietly protecting the small people. And I like that about my history in the military, is that we would go somewhere to help people, right? And if there were bad actors there, we could take them out. And we did when it was necessary. But then we didn't thump our chest and say, look at us, we're so tough, celebrate the military. It was cool. So when I went to law school, I ended up helping a bunch of people in law school because I was older, because law is dysfunctional. It creates dysfunctional human beings. It's scarcity driven. Everybody is terrified.
The business of law.
The law school is the single most unhealthy organization I've ever seen.
Oh, wow.
Now everybody wants to be a lawyer, but because it creates full scarcity. Everybody is competing. Everybody thinks they won't get a job.
There's only so many pieces.
Everybody is made to feel like they'll never be successful. And it just creates, you have high intelligence people fighting for this, and it just makes them, they put the right stuff, the wrong stuff in the front. And they forget.
They value the wrong things.
Yeah, they want to get recognized. They want to get the job. They want to get this. And I'm just like, look, when you get a legal education, it's like giving me, a sniper rifle. Now I have something that I can do a lot of damage or good with, right?
Especially
so
up here.
You give somebody a law degree, you can go do a lot of good, or you can go do a lot of damage. Mm-hmm. Most of them, but because the big firms sponsor the law schools for the most part, they've got everybody churning towards success as being in the big firm, making good money, right? And it's so I enjoyed the law school experience, but then I thought if I became a Crown attorney, I could kind of, similar to the military, I could be doing good for people, putting bad guys away, wearing the white Lone Ranger hat.
What's the definition of a Crown attorney for our audience?
It's like a district attorney in the U.S., a prosecutor.
Yeah, okay.
Like a prosecutor. So you're hired by the Ontario government to kind of put the bad guys away. And so I went into that environment. I was well suited for it. My background, I had some psychological operations training, information warfare, strategic training. I briefed, government officials and prime ministers. So I could speak. And the military, you kind of get forged in fire, and you come out tougher, and you don't get phased. So I remember the first time when I was a young articling student with the Crown attorney trying to do a trial, the judge was yelling at me, and the judge is like, Mr. Millar, you don't seem to be reacting to me yelling at you. And I'm like, Your Honor, you're just a guy sitting on a chair, you're not shooting at me. Right? And
we're going to be okay.
Yeah. He pulled me in after. He's like, I love that you talk to me like that. He goes, all these lawyers are so weak. Yeah. I'm like, but I was just...
What's the worst that's going to happen right now?
Yeah. And I'm not going to apologize for for trying to do something right.
Yeah.
You know, like if I'm unprepared or if I'm doing something for the wrong reasons, then I can be embarrassed, but I'm never going to be, you know. So I like that dynamic, but then as a Crown for a while, it became a bit bureaucratic and
political.
Yeah, it was too disorganized to be political. It was just, the Canadian system is far fairer than the US. It's amazing because they're not elected.
Okay.
The last thing you want to do is have your prosecutors elected.
We can go down that wormhole on another episode, which we will.
But it was like being in a grocery line.
Yeah.
Like your advancement was just, are you lucky to be in the right line?
Not the best guy.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
It wasn't a meritocracy. And then I quickly realized that I was just putting a lot of people in jail because their lawyers sucked.
Yeah.
Right? It was like, it's just, the system is so overwhelmingly in the favor of the government and you had people who were drug addicts and they're going to jail. It wasn't giving me that joy.
It wasn't fixing the problem.
No, it wasn't giving me the joy. And so then I ended up leaving, going to a big firm in town, learning some litigation, but then saying, okay, these people are not functional.
Yeah.
In terms of they don't know how to play in a sandbox or have a group goal ahead of their individual goals. And then I just ended up starting Millar's law.
Around fighting for the little guy, going in and helping people, right?
I think that's what I was interested in doing. It wasn't like, hey, I want to start a law firm to fight for the little guy. Like I wanted to make cash. Like I like making money. I like winning. But I just realized, because I had an entrepreneurial background, that
there's a purpose.
And I had an advantage over other lawyers who were like kind of scared to take risks. They weren't entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And then I've been running that for 10 years. But everybody who works for me, you know, I always tell them, like, look, we do the right thing, right? Because people need us, and we don't overbill. But I refer to, and that's why I think I've become close friends with you, is because you seem to be like something similar in your profession than what and I don't know you all that well, but like I wanted to kind of make the profession a bit different. Right? There's still a lot of good people in law, but I just wanted to be that person.
You can do better than the standard. I think that's like, you're always going to move the goalposts, right? Like I don't think you're the type of guy that's like, I need to make this much money and do this many deals, and once I do that, sit on my boat and I'm just going to relax. Like you're never going to relax because you're not built like that. You're always going to be looking at different ways, different angles. You see things in other industries that you think you could bring some knowledge to, great. But you're open to conversation and you're open to learning. You're always reading new books. Like
it's kind of similar. Cool dynamic, you're similar, right? In that in both of our professions, the ego could take over.
Yeah.
Like in law, I see people all the day posturing about their ego, more concerned about their ego than their client.
How the community views you, right?
Yeah, or you know, and what I hate about lawyers is when I saw them like hanging out in their groups, all like you know, with their noses up, making fun of the clients, and I'm like, trash. I don't care if you like me, Mr. Lawyer from London, you know what I mean, whose family, right? I've got somebody who needs me, right? So, sorry if I ruffle your feathers by pushing back. And when I looked at you as a realtor and why I would send any of my good friends to you, and all of them, is because I trust that you would not put them in a deal that wasn't good for them for your own ego, because you wanted to beat somebody else to a deal, or because you needed the money. Like I know you would take a hit, just like I would take a hit for the benefit of the client, and that reminds me of the relationships I had when I was in the special forces. Like that is a rare commodity, and you definitely have that.
I think it's holding each other accountable. I'm sorry to cut you off, but like having a guy like you in my world that like I want to be able to tell me something like that. Like to me, that's worth more than a $100,000 paycheck. But now I know I have to live up to that standard. Yeah. So when we're going back and forth on stuff, I know you've got that.
It does work that way too, though, because as soon as I say that, it's almost like subconsciously, because I say that to you. If I send somebody to you, you're never gonna screw them.
Never in a million years.
You wouldn't anyhow.
We
but
had
it doesn't
a guy this weekend that like it's not even in our wheelhouse technically, but I connected him with the right people, and we're trying to help him get through a situation.
Let me tell that story because I think it speaks to law firm and to you.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I'd love to that, because that story you told me was one of the reasons why we're doing this. Again, we're like, hey, like let's just come in and chat, because I think the public doesn't know a lot of
So I referred you a client, a new lawyer that I'm hiring, who comes from Pakistan, and I just knew you would take care of him, and but I knew he's not somebody who's going to make your firm a ton of money, but I know that you think in the infinite game, not the finite game. So if this guy becomes a successful lawyer, he's got family, he's going to buy houses, but you just want to take care of people.
That comes naturally, but like he's a human being. He's got an issue that.
But you can't help every human being he needs a rental. So you took care of him. But this guy came to me looking for a job, and we're expanding our divorce family law department, and I interviewed a bunch of these people who thought they were geniuses, and but I didn't get a sense from them that they cared about the actual clients who are in divorce law. You're very susceptible to having a lawyer spin you up to get more angry, because the more angrier you are, the more money you'll pay, right? So with my psychological operations training, if somebody came in and their spouse had cheated on them, I could get that person so angry they'd sell everything to give to it, but it's not in their interest. So I had a bunch of those, and then this guy came in, he's from Pakistan, and so I was like, let's see what he talks about. And so I interviewed him, just like a gentleman, just like a gentleman, but a competent, hardworking gentleman who came over 3 years ago, and he was a lawyer in Pakistan. And maybe your listeners don't know, but in Pakistan and India, their working language is English. So if you go to England, to India or Pakistan, everybody speaks English. That's the business language, and they use our same law. It's called the common law. So if you're a lawyer in Pakistan or India, you can do law here, system, right? You know English and you know the system, right? But he had been a lawyer for 8 years in India doing criminal law and a little bit of family law. And then he came over to Canada 3 years ago, and he got a job at the Ministry of Attorney General as a clerk. So I knew he would like work. So this guy was an 8-year lawyer over there, which is very high up in that country. He's working as a clerk. Then he gets into Osgoode, gets a master's degree, right? And then is looking for work. So he's got some per diem work, but nobody in London would hire him because he didn't have Canadian experience. And when I interviewed him,
how do you get experience without getting experience?
Yeah,
right?
But when I interviewed him, I said, man, I think your time in Pakistan, as a criminal defense lawyer and a family lawyer, is extraordinarily valuable to my firm. And he got a little water in his eyes, and I'm like, did I say something wrong? He goes, I'm sorry. He goes, I don't mean to. He goes, but in all the time I've been in Canada, you are the first lawyer who has given 1 ounce of value to what I did in Pakistan. And I just said, from that lens that we process things, right? I see that that's an amazing asset. That guy, to do that work in Islamabad, he had to hustle, he had to work, he had to solve complex problems, right? And if I can get him first, like as an entry lawyer now, just a good business decision, but that human dynamic.
And valuing him too, right? Like making him feel like somebody's loving on him. It's going to inspire him to do better work, right?
So we continue the conversation. I rarely do this, but I just hired him on the spot. I was just like, look, I just feel too good about this. I'm like, you're hired, buds. Come up here. And then it turns out, he goes, well, I did some research. London has 10% of the population, is from an East Indian, that part of the world. And there's not a lawyer in town that speaks Hindu, Pashtun, or Urdu. And he speaks all three.
Wow.
So I made a decision that felt good. Okay. But in the end, from a business perspective, there's no lawyer in town for that 10% who speak that language. So it's going to get personal injury. Like
doing the right thing is always the right thing, right? And it always will work itself out. And especially in communities like that, where they'll value having somebody that they can trust, that they're comfortable with. Because I think we live in a world where it is fearful to go out there, and communities will transfer over.
And so he's moving from Toronto, and he's got 2 young kids, and that's why I said, look, Nasser, I want your family to be happy here. And I said, there is nobody who I trust more to make sure your family is treated well than Justin Conoco. And I'm not saying this because you invited me on it, but that's why I called you up and I asked you to take care of them.
Well, it's the team and the organization, right? Like there's things I've called you on, I've sent clients your way where like I hear a story, I know nothing about law, and I'm like, whether it's your specialty or not, I know your outfit has the right people to take care of it.
To get them in the right spot,
So give this guy a shout. Like I always make the comparison to the mechanic that, you need your brake fixed, but you don't want to go there and all of a sudden you're changing your tie rods and getting alignment and you need a new engine. You just send them to somebody and say, here you go. I think, it's crucial to build an organization that...
Do you have that mechanic?
I do, yeah.
So send me that contact because, I want those people, more of those people in my life as well.
I do. I actually keep a database, and when people in my world bring people in, they all become part of the family, right? And I think it's just about
Who is that
community
mechanic?
building. It's the Grogans.
The Grogan? Oh.
The Grogans, Grogan Ford.
Oh, so they'll repair anything?
They'll do anything for you. This isn't a pitch for...
okay, well, I'll take my car to Grogan. I know that they're very honest people.
Yeah, the Grogans are my in-laws, and they're big fans of Phil as well, too. I know that...
but they're the most honest people I've ever met, too.
Wonderful human beings. And I mean, we all look at the world in our own lens, like we were talking about before. And I think having people that look at things differently and being open to having those discussions makes for a more colorful world from a high level. I do want to ask you, what are lessons that you've learned going through that path from military to litigation to a big law firm to going through and being an entrepreneur in many different facets? Like, what's maybe one key lesson that you think a young entrepreneur starting a business that was you 20 years ago, you'd give them?
what I would give a young entrepreneur today. I don't know, like if you don't have a gut check, it's hard to figure out what you're made of. And so
So a gut check being like a tough situation.
A gut check is like, you actually, you know, we kind of have an entitlement culture where people are like, they want everything right away and they complain, you know, and I talked harshly to somebody the other day in my office. Now I try to have, right, but I could just tell that this new young guy, he's not used to that. But it wasn't mean, but so getting a thick skin, but when you do those courses where you go through a gut check, and when I started one of the toughest courses I ever did, when you looked around the starts, we started with 72, right? And when I first, you know, surveyed those 72 guys, there was like 8, 9 guys who like were walking barrel chested. You thought these guys are gonna kill it on this course, right?
First one's gone.
Right? Yeah. And then there was like a collection of vagabonds from like Alberta, you know, but then, you know, and I judged them. Right? But then as you get into the course, and then when you get on that first kind of 2-week course where, you know, you don't have any food, you know, then you see how people act at 4 o'clock in the morning when they haven't slept for 2 days and they're hungry, right? You see who can put the group ahead, and those guys who everybody thought was cool, and I see them in our profession, they're always the shiniest guys with the newest car, right? They're not reliable. Yeah. They're shutting it down.
Inconsistent.
Yeah, and then it's those people that I judge as not having the parts because of appearance, who ended up being the guy who would come up to, like I remember once being hurting, and it was like 4 and we only had a short time to sleep, and this guy needed sleep as much as anybody, and he offered to help me out so I could do something. So he sacrificed, you know, some sleep for me, and that was just a real, yeah. And so I think in the law firm, I think a little bit like you, we're kind of populated by some vagabonds who people didn't recognize the value in them, and so I live to find people who have real value, but the system is not recognizing, then help build them into champions. I think you're doing the same thing.
Best mindset on the face of the earth. I think, because I do think we're in like a generational shift too, where it's gone from go to here, get your degree, go to school, this is how you go. Like I watched an entire breakdown on the education system, and the degree equals this job. Well, instead of you become an employee, become management, well, you know, go get this degree and then you become upper management. That's all going away because the entrepreneurs are able to move quicker and faster than a lot of the big companies, and that's why they're winning a lot of mandates and beating the big companies at a lot of things. Is it takes such a long time to turn a big ship around. God. But if you have a quick little Navy SEAL team, I call it jokingly, you can adapt to the marketplace and where the attention's going way faster than anybody else.
You have to read a book, because this speaks to the strategy that I loved in the military, and it's called Colonel Boyd, who's an American, but there's actually a science behind what you're talking about. Yeah. And it's based in the Korean War. If we got 5 minutes, I'll tell you about it.
Yeah, 100%.
So in the Korean War, the Air Force between the North Korean and the Americans, the North Koreans were using Russian MiG fighters. Yeah. It was a superior fighter aircraft, faster, better firepower, everything. But the US Hornets had a bigger cupola. Cupola is so that you could see around it, right? And so this Colonel Boyd saw that the American fighters were killing the Russian fighters, right? Even though they had far superior, but it was because of what it's called the decision action cycle. So it's observe, orient, decide, act. And so imagine 2 planes are flying, right? If this can't turn as much and he doesn't see the info, so this person is doing 2 cycles, like this person is doing 2 decision cycles for every one this one does.
Because he's got to turn his...
So he turns here, this guy goes boom, boom. This guy turns once, boom, boom. Right? And it operates in business.
You're incrementally taking steps ahead. And then
that guy is responding to old information. You're ahead. And so in World War II, what was relevant is the Germans, nobody thought the Germans could go through Belgium to attack France. France and Belgium were equal armies with the Maginot Line. Equal armies, right? France surrendered in 3 weeks. The biggest defeat ever of any army, right? But the Germans had adopted what's called intent-based leadership or maneuver warfare theory. So when they snuck through the Belgian forest, what the Rommel said is, our goal is the surrender of France. So the old armies, the French army was very hierarchical and slow like a business. So when they broke through the Belgian Ardennes and they were behind all of the French and there was nobody between them and France, the old days you would sit, send a telegraph back, telegraph would come back, move another thing, right? So the French heard they broke through. It took them like 3 days to get something moving. The divisional commander of the Germans just said, our goal is the surrender of France. Nobody's between me and France. Let's go. And so they're going here. So the French launch their thing to go to this breach. By the time they get there, the Germans are here.
Yeah.
Right? And then they retrain them to go here. And then the Germans are here. And they've destroyed all of the supply lines, everything, and France surrenders. Equal army in 3 weeks. And that's example of the business when you have a tight ship that can make decisions fast on accurate information.
Let's go back to the conversation about ego, because as a leader of a company, you can't believe your own hype. I mean, I'm in the real estate industry. There's a lot of agents that believe their own hype. If you're one of those agents, go do something difficult. Go try jiu-jitsu. Go try rock climbing, and challenge yourself, because you ain't that special. And there's somebody younger coming up behind you that's going to take everything you've built if you get lazy. But from an organizational standpoint, as a leader, you do have to stand out, right? You have to be able to have a vision and see things that the people that are working for you, that are working in the here and now, are like, that's insane. What do you mean we're going to be doing that? Like, this is what the entire industry is doing. This is what we should be doing. And that's a way you've really delineated yourself and really made a difference for the way I see you run your company, is thinking 6 steps ahead, but then not being, too driven by your own ego to not be able to adapt if you're wrong, or you're mid-course and things change, right? Because things change every day.
It's true.
Yeah. So, how has failure shaped your life?
Well, every time there was a setback, when I went to the big firm after I left the Crown's office, I was good friends with the managing partners, but the medium-sized partners, they didn't like that this new upstart was in there, being friends, doing stuff, so they voted me out. So it was essentially fired.
Yep.
And then I thought, this sucks, right?
Everybody's going to pay attention. It's going to shock the world.
Right, but then that led me to start the firm. So really, all of the good achievements come from those setbacks, right? And if you can't, I don't want to be cliche. Everybody says, well, you got to keep failing, but you learn way more from a failure than from a success. But as long as you're failing for the right reason,
failing forward.
But if you're just failing, trying to do the right thing, like I've lost big trials, right? And I took risks, you know what I mean? But I knew I can go to sleep knowing it was for the right thing.
And if you stand, that's the thing, right? Is you think you can get caught in your own world thinking of something as a failure when it's the best thing to ever happen. When we've both done it, I know you've turned down business and I've walked away from business that some agents would call me crazy for. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't line up with where I see things going, it's going to hamper you. It's going to tie your hands, where sometimes you make a hard decision on a file that you're like, it'd be great to take this from a monetary value perspective. It doesn't line up with who I am. You use a burden lifted off your back, right? Or you feel like you walk with a lighter step.
To go back to young entrepreneur, they're very worried about perception. And liberty is when you stop caring what other people think.
It's true.
Right? So, they're worried about failure just because they're embarrassed. Right? Just stop worrying about it.
Nobody cares.
Just get on with it.
Nobody's paying attention. They're too busy on TikTok or Snapchat to care what you're doing in your life.
Just keep moving forward.
Because we're friends and we keep in touch, but at the same time, time goes by really quickly. If 3 or 4 weeks go by, we catch up. I just saw you on Saturday at the event, which I was super thankful that you showed up, and it's fun to be in that dynamic, but time goes by very quickly.
Are we going to finish this podcast with a TikTok video?
We can if you want.
I haven't got to use TikTok, but I can do, Despacito if you like, or...
Have you heard that TikTok's owned by a company in China?
China, yeah.
The dynamic behind that, what's your opinion on China on the world stage right now?
They're an empire that thinks 20 years down the road, while Western society thinks 6 months to 12 months.
It's pretty clear that that's what they're doing, right?
But now, as they are becoming modernized and raising the standard of living, things change too, so they can't keep up what they were. So, they're not necessarily the enemy, they're just going to act in their own interest.
I think people need to have different lenses too, because there's human beings on the other side of that, right? I think it comes down to the individual and really, pouring yourself into or opening up your eyes beyond the lens that you tend to look at the world.
Do I think we should be able to make a factory here with robotics cheaper than having it made in China by cheap labor and then shipped over? I think good companies can find ways to do things here, but it doesn't mean that we're going to have a manufacturing base like we did in the past, because robotics are going to do it all.
The world needs to open up their eyes that industries are changing, right? Thinking that things are always going to be the way they once were. I truly believe people are very resilient, and they'll adapt and they'll find different things. If all of a sudden the autonomous trucks take over and take over that industry, well, those people still have value and they have skills in other things. Maybe the guy's a bow hunter and he goes down that rabbit hole and becomes something that he actually loves doing.
But that's the challenge. I think that's why Andrew Yang was talking about that. Like
that was a good breakdown.
That's the biggest employer in the United States. So you got like a 50-year-old truck driver. They're not the most malleable. Some will find it, but there will be some casualties of that.
There will be.
And that's why
they said autonomous trucks. Then they said telecenters or call centers are the next after that, and voice recognition software is going right down that alley, right? But I want to wrap this up. I want to bring some value to you guys. You know, what can I do to add value to you, or what can my audience do as an action item to kind of expose themselves to your world and your knowledge, because you guys have some great expertise. Where can they go to see all your content?
So millarslaw.com is our website, and you know, I'm not shy about saying that we have the most Google reviews of any law firm in Southwestern Ontario. Wow. 5 stars, and those are from clients, so that's something I'm very proud of.
Okay.
And it blows my mind away that these big law firms don't think it's important to get those reviews, but they, you know, my mission is to do kind of boutique services for people who need help, you know, and I compete against big money firms, you know, and they got to pay for their marble. And so, you know, what people can do is just go check out our blog. We try to put a lot of good content on there. There's a lot of good
there's stuff that shocked me, like little tips about getting, you know, pulled over and what you should know, what you shouldn't know. So there is like incredible content, and you know, I want to thank you for being who you are. Honestly, like having lunches with you, challenging me on things that I think about, being open to conversations that I've had with you both ways, and you know, I'm sure we'll do more of these in the future.
Hey, we have a big lawsuit coming up in the next week or two that'll be in the media. That's even scary a little bit to me, but it's the right thing to do, and you know, your listeners can follow that and see how we're doing it. But it's going to be big and juicy.
Okay, we'll be watching for that. Thanks, Phil.
You too,
awesome.
brother.